As a woodworker, I don't know how many times I've brought material home and it looks flat, but it ends up not being flat. And it's either cupped, warped, twisted, you name it. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you all the steps I take to get things flat. Like this. So whether you like to use hand tools or a planer and a sled, either way, I'm going to teach you all the steps I take. So then you can build stuff and it'll be pretty. Let's go. So my first step is always the same. I grab my material, I look at which one's the worst one. In this case, this fir is very twisted and warped. So I'm going to have to address that first. This white hard maple is kind of cupped but kind of bowed as well. So we have to select the right tool for the job. Now, if you like using hand planes, feel free to use a hand plane. But if you don't, if you have the option for an electric hand plane, use that. It is much user friendly, and if you mess up, it's a lot easier to fix. You don't have to mess with like any little chisels or anything like that. Anywho, alternatively, you can actually get your lumber pre-surfaced when you purchase it from a hardwood dealer, if you buy it from a hardwood dealer. But if you don't, then it is what it is. Anyways, if given the option between a hand planer and an electric hand planer, I will always choose the electric hand planer because again, it's less things that can go wrong. So my first step when using the electric hand planers, set it to the 64th of an inch, which is that first little notch. And then I'm going to start milling my lumber. And what I mean by milling my lumber is I'm removing the little divots and crowns and all the little imperfections of the face before I start trying to make it flat. Once all of those are pretty much gone, then I'll start bringing out my square, and that's where I'm going to actually start pinpointing where exactly I need to plane. And again, there's just real light passes, and if you don't know how to use an electric planer, feel free to look at a tutorial. But basically, you put the pressure on the front first, let it get to the highest RPMs that it can, and as you start cutting into the wood, then you put the pressure on the back. And that's pretty much the simplicity of it. Anyway, it's a pretty messy job, so as you see here, I love cleaning and sweeping, so that's what I did. Now, once those two issues are addressed with the fir, I can run it through my planer. But I also have to make sure that the infeed and outfeed are parallel to the face of the planer. So let's start with the hard maple. I'm going to bring out my planer sled, which is just two pieces of plywood glued together. One really flat one and one that doesn't really matter because it just needs to be secured to the plywood. Anyway, so once I get the planer sled out, I put the maple on top, and I'm just looking for the shims that are going to fit that cup. I noticed pretty quickly that it's not going to work out. So I flipped it over, and then I found the shims, and I started gluing them on permanently. Well, I guess not permanently, but gluing them securely. So that way, when the pressure of the planer pushes down, it doesn't bend. Before I run it through the planer, I always scribble it like a crazy person because that's going to tell me where the faces are. And make sure your glue is ready to go. Like it can't be melty anymore. It's got to solidify. Then I just find the measurement of the thickness of my current maple, and then I'm going to run it through the sled, or using the sled and run it through the planer. And look at the dust board. You can see in some areas it's removing some material, and in some areas it's not. As a matter of fact, on the first pass, it didn't even push it all the way through because that cup and bow is so present. Anyway, after every quarter turn, which is all I do for my planer, just a quarter turn before I send it again, eventually it will come out looking nice and clean with no pencil marks or Sharpie marks. At that point, you know it's flat on that side. Now, if you are interested in what I mean by the quarter turn, I'll show you that in just a second. We'll get back to that. Anyway, once it's flat, you can remove the shims, which is what's good about that hot glue is It's permanent, but not really. Then I Sharpie it again like I showed you in the past. And then I'm just going to send it right through. No sled, no nothing. Just like that. On the other side, as you'll see here in a second, once I pull it out, you'll see where it actually cut and where it didn't, which is the really nice thing about sharpening it up like that. And as you see from the dust port again, sometimes it's cutting and sometimes it's not. And that's because the board right now is not flat yet, but it will be. So if you look at the dust extractor, at some point there should be no gaps from start to finish. And that's when you know your board is perfectly flat and parallel to each side. So if your board, for example, has a cup in it and you just run it through the planer, then it's still going to have a cup in it, but it's going to be flat and parallel to that, but the cup will be present. Anyway, going back to the fur, I'm just going to send it right through, just like that. Now, the side that I'm sending to be cut, the flat side we created is on the bottom, and the side that is definitely not flat at all is on the top, and that's the part that's Sharpied right now. And here's where I do that quarter turn. So I lift up the cutter head lock, I do the quarter turn, and I relock the cutter head. And then I just send it again until all the Sharpie marks are gone. I'll redo all the Sharpie marks and I'll send it through again. I really need to make sure that this side is as flat as it can be, because that will now be the new reference to the side we originally planed in the first little segment where we were planing stuff. Now at some point all your squiggles are going to be gone. You re-squiggle it and send it through again. That's how you'll know that both your faces are 100% parallel to each other. Now when I was a beginner, I used to send it a third time on the initial face, but I realized that that just seems kind of pointless now. Anyway, I bring out a level, I make sure it's flat lengthwise, and I use a square, or more specifically a combination square, to make sure that it's flat widthwise once I give it a new face. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to cut the edge using my level against the table saw, and there you go. You can see that there. The level is against the fence of the table saw. And then using my combination square, I'm going to make sure everything is flat and square. This part here, it's called snipe, which is a little divot in which the planer for some reason catches it too early or releases it too late. I'm not sure, but it happens mostly with pretty much anything I put through it. Now, if I get the in feed and out feed 100% perfect, it doesn't happen as much, but it's still pretty prevalent. So all I do is know that I'm going to have that, so I just ahead of time plan that I'm going to need to cut that off at some point. Anyway, I do the same thing with the hard maple. I put my level against my table saw fence, and then I'm just giving it a nice clean edge. Now, if you're not familiar with hard maple, it's a very sappy wood, which means if you don't have smooth cuts, it will show in the wood. So you let me know. Are these flat enough for you to build with, or would you keep planing them? Or what method do you use to plane your wood down?